All right, welcome everybody. This is Shelf Space episode 21. And we have a special guest alongside our regular host. We got Charles out in Montreal.
Hey,
We got
everybody.
Gina in Toronto.
Hello.
I'm Chris. I'm out in Edmonton. We have live from Brazil, special guest Alvaro Ribeiro.
Yeah. Hi.
Alvaro, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we're
It's an
very
honor.
happy to have you here. So, just to give people a quick rundown before we get started, we're just going to walk through Alvaro's career, how he got to where he is, uh, some of your past works, your portfolio with XM Studios, Prime One. You got a Sume piece there. And at the end of the show, he's gonna show us a live demo of a little sculpting tutorial, I guess, on screen here. So
To show us how easily it's done.
yeah, after this, we'll all be expert sculptors, right? So, once again, thanks for joining us, Alvaro. So, we're just going to get started here, jump into your background. Gina, do you want to start it off?
Sure. Well, first of all, of course, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be on the show. Um, I think, as Chris and Charles can attest, we've had a number of artists on the show and sculptors, and the majority of them have not begun with traditional education in art. They somehow, from any different sort of way, they've sort of gotten into art, but not by any formal way whatsoever. Is that similar in your situation? How did you get into art and into sculpting?
So since I was a kid, I used to draw a lot. Uh, my my father and my grandmother used to make oil paintings on canvas.
Oh, wow.
So here, just simple things. They are not professionals, but here in my house, I have some paintings done by them. So I think this inspired me to start drawing. So I was this kid in school who would draw during the classes. Um, and when I turned 18, I had to choose a career, right? Like everyone
Yeah,
else.
like yeah.
So here in my city, there is this university. It's very good, and there was this new course for cinema and animation, and it sounded cool, so I joined it, and but soon I realized that animation wasn't really my passion. I started studying 3D in general, art. I did traditional animation, like in paper, everything. But what I most liked to do was to sculpt characters on the computer. So uh, I studied all day in university, and then when I got home, I used to focus my work on creating characters, 3D characters. So I have this little background in art, but it was most my interest to learn by myself this 3D stuff.
That's
So
great.
slowly I got into the collectibles.
Wow.
When you're saying that you were creating characters, are you saying you were creating your own characters, or were you working with characters you already knew, like superheroes or something like that?
At the beginning, I was mostly creating my own characters, like for fun. At first my dream was to work with games, so I wanted to join Blizzard or these big studios.
Right.
Uh, so I created my characters. Sometimes I did different versions of characters who exist. Like I created Thor from Marvel, but a different version. I created this old Thor with white beard and everything. But I was just having fun. Nothing professional.
That
That's all
that
right.
gaming route, that's a pretty popular route. It seems like
Yeah,
for people in your industry. A lot of them have started there.
yeah,
I would
most,
even say generation. It
yeah,
seems to be the generation because just as a quick aside, people more, closer to my age, comic book stores were everywhere,
yeah.
right? And, people more in their 20s or even early 30s, there aren't any. There's like one, and you have to drive a half hour to go to it, and it's not something you can do very often. And also, it was pre-internet,
Yeah,
so you have a lot more distractions and competition for your time creatively and also recreationally.
yeah. Uh, if I was born earlier, I guess I would be more into comics and drawing. But I was like this kid who used to play Super Nintendo all day. So,
Right, right, right.
yeah, I lived in this video games generation. I'm not
Well,
much into comics.
well, the parallel, right, with this generation as the ones before is still the draw to the fantasy, right? It's still the draw, outside reality, the larger than life, and that's something that has never died. It's just changed its expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
which video game do you think had the biggest influence on you when you were growing up and getting into art?
Um, Mostly Blizzard games like World of Warcraft.
Okay.
There was this map in Warcraft 3 called Dota. I don't know if you know.
No.
And I played it for thousands of hours. It was
Wow.
it has a huge impact in my life. But there was some PS2 games called Dark Alliance and Champions of the Wrath. It's my most fantasy RPG game. It has huge influence in my life too. But all this RPG stuff, I love it.
yeah, I'm
Great
a
stuff.
big RPG fan myself. Did you play Diablo in those games? You said you're a Blizzard fan.
Yeah, yeah. Mostly Diablo 3. I have a statue that I created for a fan statue that I created for the witch doctor from Diablo 3.
Uh,
I'm
Awesome.
a big fan of this world.
So you said you sort of started off. You got into the digital art fairly early. What
Yeah.
programs were you using off the start? Like, is there? I'm assuming there was no ZBrush at that time or ZBrush.
ZBrush is actually really old. I think ZBrush has already 20 years.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Oh, okay.
yeah, but when I first started, I was using Blender. That is a open source software.
Hmm.
It's really cool, and I use it for many years. But now I use only ZBrush for work.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have we usually round up this particular question with a question like this, like, how did you get discovered? Like, how did people, find you and want to work with you and, bring things to your attention?
So at the beginning, it's the hardest part of the career for an artist like me. It's to get this first big job, because when you're just doing personal stuff for fun, you don't get big companies don't see you. So when I was in the university, I had the opportunity to study with a very famous artist called Rafael Grassetti. He is a Brazilian artist too, and today he's the art director at God of War and Sony. So he's a
Wow.
big.
wow.
He did some statues for Sideshow too. I think the last Wolverine.
He did Wolverine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I
Or
was
part of
lucky
it.
to
Yeah.
have.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. The hand was done by Marco. You
Yep.
already had a
Yeah.
chat with
Marco
him,
Plouffe.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
He's familiar to the show he's been on.
oh, Marco is great. I love this guy. So I had this opportunity to study with Rafael Grassetti, and after the classes, I did my best to show him my work, to make contact with him. So after that, he slowly started to invite me to help him in some projects. So it was my big opportunity, because since then I was doing only very boring stuff like advertisement stuff, 3D sculpting of buildings and houses, uh,
Right.
only boring thing. But
You got to make a living.
yeah, yeah. So there was this day that Rafael invited me to help him sculpting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the Prime One Studio.
Oh,
The
wow.
first four
Yep.
statues, right? For the first movie, and it was like a dream for me because I was like helping the artist who was my biggest inspiration. Since I started learning 3D, Grassetti was my hero. So I was there working with him. So I learned a lot with him, and I had a lot of fun in this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles statues. And after that, a few months later, Prime One contacted Rafael again to work on a project, but he's really busy. He was like probably doing God of War, I don't know. And he said he didn't have time. So Prime One searched his portfolio, and they saw my name on the credits for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they decided to send me a message, a Facebook message, asking me if I wanted to do a project for them. I was like
Sure.
frozen. Yeah, I was
Wow.
shocked. What? Uh, and the project was the Arcanite Batman. It's a huge project.
Oh yeah.
It was a big success for Prime One, and I was really afraid, of course, but I got the job. I worked really hard, and after Batman, I did Arkham Knight, Batman versus Superman, and I
Batman
yeah,
Beyond.
yeah.
Hmm.
Since then, I never stopped working. So this Batman was the most important job in my career for sure.
When you think about that Batman project in particular, like, do you consider the impact it had on the industry? Now I'll explain what I mean by that. Up until that point, quarter scale was king, and people were shying away from third scale. Some people are still shying away from third scale, but then they saw this Batman, and it changed a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
Like do you absorb that kind of thing? Like, do you feel like, wow, like I
So we
had
can
I had
blame
an
Alvaro for our losing all our money.
well, when we talk about Prime One a little bit more later, like I saw a number of your pieces today, and I am so close to becoming among the converted. The stuff is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Before the Batman, Prime One, I think they only had a few Transformers, maybe, and the Turtles. And I feel that Batman was really different from. It has more a museum pose, right? And the base itself, I think it was the biggest change in the style of the Prime One statues. Um, the Batman itself, it's not my creation, of course. It's from the game, and we can talk about it later. But creating the base for me was a big challenge, and I feel really happy because I feel that after this Batman, all most of Prime One statues followed
The
this
theme.
style. Yeah, this gargoyle building theme, the pipes, then the copper, all this. I'm looking here because Batman is here on my side,
Yeah.
but but yeah, I feel I'm really happy. I feel this Batman was a big game changing in the industry, and
We call it a benchmark moment, right?
yeah.
When people something and they want more of it. Whereas before there was no interest in it, not because there was no
Yeah,
interest in it, because they just didn't know what it was. It wasn't out there, and then people see something, they go wow, and they want to see more of it. And it's always nice to have your name attached to something like that. Must feel good.
yeah, I feel really good, very proud, and yeah, this Batman is very important for me.
All right. So quickly before we move on to walk through some of your other projects, Say hi to Uriel Mendez. I'm sure I'm not saying that properly, but they're watching. They typed something to you. I'm assuming it's in Portuguese,
Oh,
Alvaro.
on
Uh,
YouTube? Let me
yeah,
check.
it says Ótimo Artista Salve from Brazil. Uh,
Oh, it means like great artist.
okay.
Hi from Brazil.
Oh,
Hi.
there you go. So hi to Ariel, and Patrick Garcia is also was online here too. So let's move
Oh,
on to talk about some XM Studio stuff. And the piece we'll maybe start off with is the one that looks like he's right on top of Charles's head, right there.
Yep.
We got the white Magneto, brand new release from XM Studios. So Charles, why don't you go ahead and start us off on this topic, and I'll just fire up some pictures here.
Well, first of all, uh, I probably own maybe close to 20 XM pieces by now.
whoa.
And this is by far the most ambitious piece. It's 40 pieces.
Yeah.
There's so much to it. You know, there's a positive and a negative to that. Like a negative, it means it takes you a long time to put it together, and it's very hard to move from one place to another. Okay, that aside, but you get so much bang for your buck. There's so much happening on this thing.
Yeah.
And I counted 24 different display options. There's 24 different ways to display this statue.
And they cut
So-
two arms. There was going to be two arms down too. So
Jeez.
it was going to come with 6 different arms.
Yeah, two different art. That would have been insane.
96 possibilities.
So I reviewed this piece, and when I review a piece, I try to take pictures of every possible situation. So imagine trying to review a piece that has 24 different display options, but it is a stunner. It captures the strength of the character. You went ahead with something we've never seen before. We've never seen a white Magneto in statue format. And, you seem to be an artist that's very comfortable taking risks.
Yeah. It was my first XM job, and it was right after I left Prime One. So it was a really hard time in my life. And it was a big challenge, of course, but I really enjoyed doing this character. I had a
Well,
lot
it
of fun.
shows because there's so much going on. And just as a quick aside, I had some words with Martin, the creative director of
Yeah.
XM, and he had like some wonderful things to say about you as well.
Oh,
That
nice.
you're a very quick study. You understand the craft well, and you're very versatile with the technology, and that makes you it sets you apart from a lot of the other artists who have to work a lot harder to get from A to B, where with you it seems to be almost second nature, and you're always pushing the envelope. Even the Lobo, from what I understand, also has a lot of pieces, a lot of construction to it.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
show
So-
that in a bit. I've got
Yeah.
pictures of that.
Well,
so-
we could take a look at some Magneto pieces here.
Yeah.
Wow, these are just beautiful pictures.
Where were these taken?
Ah, yeah. Against this wall.
Yeah.
We're gonna see which one is my favorite pose. It's the one with where he's holding the two globes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me-
That is my favorite pose of them all.
What's your favorite
Yeah.
pose of the statue, Alvaro?
I like the missile one because this one was my idea. At
Ah,
first, there was only these weapons, this ball of weapons. I don't know, but it's really cool to work with XM because they are very open to new ideas. So they told me, "Oh, can you create something new for the statue?" And I said, "Oh, why don't we make him stopping a missile in the air?" And we did it, and I like this option too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just flipping through some pictures. So yeah, we saw this in we saw the prototype. It wasn't painted yet in Singapore.
Yeah.
A couple years ago.
A year
Really,
and a
really
half
cool.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. The one on the left. That's my
Oh yeah,
favorite pose. I find that's the one where, sorry, I'm interrupting, Chris. I find that's the one where it's consistent. You know, the right hand is consistent with what the left hand is doing,
Yeah.
and I really like the look of that. I liked the missile also, um, but I like the globe one just a bit
Yeah.
more.
This was the original idea. So I had this challenge to make uh, two arms, completely different arms to fit in the same body. So it's hard sometimes because when you do this to your arms, your shoulder, your anatomy changes a lot.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it was really a big challenge. So if we made the statue only with the this missile, it would be easier to make a nice pose because we would make all his torso, all his pose, um, doing this. But yeah,
Well, the
yeah,
positive with a character like Magneto, he doesn't really need to pose to control metal.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, you know, so you get away with it, right?
yeah.
Whereas if it was like a physical punch or lifting up something, then you're kind of
Yeah, it's
stuck.
different.
You see, what one example of what you're talking about is that a number of years ago, XM did a Thor statue, and they used the same pose for when he was sticking out his hand, reaching out with his hand, and when he was spinning his hammer, and
Oh
that
yeah,
didn't quite work because
yeah,
the spinning hammer should have been a much different pose
yeah.
than when he's just reaching out with his hand.
Also, the
Still a
Iron
beautiful
Fist,
piece.
the statue, I think at first they had this idea of making him kicking the wall and kicking the floor. It
Yeah.
was a little weird, but I think at the end they cut
Yeah,
the
they
floor.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's just kicking the
That's
wall at the end,
yeah,
which was
much
probably a
better.
good idea.
the better idea. Yeah.
Okay, so let's any other points to make about Magneto, Gina or Charles?
Well, just one last point. When you're working on a piece that has like 40 pieces, and did you find this particularly challenging? Because it was challenging for me just to put it together. So I'm just wondering how challenging it must have been for you to create every individual piece on your program.
Yeah, it's a big challenge because you have to make the statue not only look good, but it has to be functional. So when it goes to production, it has to be well designed because some artists they just make the statue and send to the XM or the
Right.
company, and they have to call
Engineer it.
NASA
Yeah.
engineering because it wasn't made to be a statue. So when I was working for Primon, I was also doing a little of the engineering. So I don't know if you have some images of it, but to to print 3D print a statue, you have to cut it in many
Oh,
pieces. Yeah,
yeah, we've seen that with other artists where they show us that because some artists are asked to do the engineering and others
yeah,
aren't.
exactly. Yeah, Sideshow asks the artist, Prime One too, and for Prime One, I made these for like 50 or more projects. So
Wow.
I was really used to it, and for XM, I couldn't just because when I started doing the Magneto, Ang, the owner of XM, he told me, "Oh, don't worry about the engineering. You have to focus on the art." But as I had this background, I couldn't just do the art. I was always thinking, "Oh, will this work? Will this bend?" So I was all the time worried about it, and
Well,
uh,
they take advantage of every single centimeter of this statue to plug something into it.
yeah,
Literally, you're all over the place trying to plug things into this base. I have never I've been buying statues for 20 years and I've never had to work on a statue this much to put together. So
wait for Lobo.
Lobo, yeah, but I think Predator has each individual hair piece is a separate piece. So
I
Yeah.
know
find that.
I saw the work in progress shots.
Okay, so
I
speaking of Lobo, let's show that we have the concept art by Ario, who
yeah,
was
yeah.
on the show recently. So he sent us this. Do
Yeah.
you when you were developing this one, did you go back and forth with him at all and just about the design, or does
I
XM just?
didn't talk to him. I just got his art and it's amazing. And with XM, they usually are not very strict about the concept art. I mean, the concept art is very important, but it's just a guide for the 3D artist. So we have a little freedom to take this concept art and make a cool statue out of it. So as you can see, the final result is a little different from
Yeah.
the concept art.
Do you find that this type of work ethic is distinct to XM? You know, where you have this freer flowing creative way of going from A to B with a project. You know, that they're not
Yeah,
very
yeah.
strict with the original concept design. They let you have some freedom.
Yes, this is one thing that I love about XM. It's this freedom. Unlike for Lobo, they at first he was going to have two heads only, this regular head and one with goggles. And I said, well, why don't we make this dread hair, Lobo? This
Right,
more
right.
uh,
Yeah, you gotta
oh,
have that one.
more than 100 pieces, I guess. Is this?
Wow.
So here it is
But
here.
yeah.
Wow.
And they said, "Oh, sure, why not?" So I make this Lobo with different hand and a cigar.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you spend more time, or was it more challenging to work on the Lobo character or the bike?
um, it's a good question because I think the bike was harder for me. As
Okay.
you can see, it's very different from the concept art, and I'm not very used to sculpt mechanical things like that,
Okay.
spaceships, cars, robots. Like Marco. Marco is a like
Oh
a
yeah.
master of sculpting
Okay.
robots. He's
Robots.
great.
Yeah.
So Lobo came a
And
bit more natural for you then.
yeah, as
Okay.
Lobo is a more organic
Right.
character with
Right.
anatomy and these things, I'm more used to it. And the bike was a really big challenge for me, but I accepted it, and I used a lot of techniques that I learned with Marco, and it was a big challenge, but at the end it worked.
Great stuff. I look forward to seeing what this will look like at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they already have some painted
Yeah. There's a few
prototype,
out there. There's a few out there. I didn't add them
some videos. Yeah.
to the show, but yeah, it is out there. I think Sang spent about 2 weeks painting the thing.
Yeah.
And incidentally, Sang had also a lot of high praise for you, and he was one of the ones that says, "Hey, you know, have you thought about interviewing Alvaro?"
Oh,
And
nice.
he kind of set this ball rolling. We would have come to you anyway, you know, at some point. But you know, Sang doesn't mention people by name very often,
Oh,
right? Because he's very private himself and he's respectful and he doesn't try to tell us what to do or anything like that. But yeah, he had a lot of high praise, you know, Martin as well. So, and one
oh,
of the,
nice.
like I said, one of the things that they've said about you more than once is how natural this seems to you. You go with the flow. Someone presents you something, even if you've never done it before, somehow you find a way to work with it. And that kind of natural ability, like, you know, you don't look like a guy who's 50 years old, right? You know, so that kind of
No.
natural ability is not something we see very often. So, you know, keep up the amazing work for sure.
Oh, nice. Thanks. Yeah, some
So
artists like I only sculpt women or only sculpt
Yeah, yeah.
aliens. So I always trying to get new challenges. So Lobo, for example, at first I saw this bike and I was like afraid, but I accepted it and we grow like this, like right?
yeah.
If we are always doing something hard, we are
Yeah.
always improving.
You know, you were mentioning something earlier, which I find interesting that, you know, other sculptors are becoming your friends. I mean, you're reaching out to other sculptors for advice. What do you think of this? You know, could we do it differently? And you guys aren't so isolated. You know, whereas maybe 10 years ago when everything was new, nobody knew anybody and you're kind
Yeah,
of blindly moving forward. And now a lot of you are friends. There's kind of like a respect for one another, you know?
yeah,
And I think that's great to see because when you guys are talking about other artists, you're talking about it as we're part of this evolution, as opposed to
Yeah.
being in competition with one another. So
Yeah.
it's really good to see.
Just
You
to
have
add
been
on,
with. Oh, sorry.
oh,
Yep.
sorry, I was just gonna say, just to add on to what Charles was saying, just from the amount of artists that we've had on the show, yeah, there seems to be a pretty close community. Like each one of you sculptors sort of at least know each other, or if they don't, at least has heard of each other. I mean, which sort of is encouraging just from an outsider's point of view. There's that type of artistic community going on, and that you guys sort of share ideas, and it kind of makes us wonder if you guys have your own secret sculpting Facebook groups, or like, Facebook chats going on that we don't know about. Which I hope you guys do. I hope you guys are all close with each other, and I mean, I think it just makes the art even better, and makes you guys even stronger.
Yeah, sure. This community, this artist community is really friendly. We are not seeing each other as enemies. So we are always helping each other, trying to give jobs to other artists. I know Victor Hugo had me here too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Oh
he's
yeah,
from
yeah. We
Brazil
had him
too,
on.
and
Yeah.
yeah, he studied with Rafael Grassetti and me in these classes that I had. So since then,
Ah,
we have been really good friends. So yeah,
It's a small world too.
yeah. And when I worked for Primon, we had like a lot of artists coming, and I was like managing all these artists. So I met a lot of great people, Marco, and many others.
Awesome.
So yeah,
So quickly before we show one more XM piece that you worked on, just quick shout out to Adam who's watching, and another one named Samurai dos Sertao. I apologize to all the Brazilians watching. I have
yeah.
no background in Portuguese whatsoever, so I am going to butcher all of those names, and I apologize. But so here's another one you did with XM Studios, so Mega Red,
Yeah.
and I'm only showing this pose here because I think they scrapped the other two arms.
Yeah.
There was another pose here. So this one I really like it. I have to say I've got this one coming. I don't know when it's scheduled to come out, but probably next year sometime. So looking forward to having a piece that you worked on in my collection, and great work on that one.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
You see that piece? Can you post a picture up once again?
Yeah.
One of the greatest evolutions of the trade that I'm seeing is how you can see the movement. You can practically hear him, making sounds with his, what do you call those, tendrils? Is that what they're called?
The tentacles,
no
yeah,
idea.
whatever. they're
Tentacles,
called, yeah.
whatever they're called. You can actually hear them whistling in the wind, and I find that this is something that you didn't see done as well even just a few years ago. Characters had a tendency to look stiffer, whereas over here you really caught him in mid motion, and it looks wonderful.
Adam saying, say his full name. I don't know how to say your last name, Adam. You'll have
Well,
to tell.
I actually like
Wait,
that every
Tastic?
part,
I don't know.
every show we have a segment where Chris tries to pronounce names,
Yeah.
and he fails miserably. And we all, Gina and I,
Yeah.
we just sit there and
that's
don't
not true.
help him
Chris,
at all.
Chris does better than I. Chris does better than
I'm
I
terrible
I
with
could
it, yeah.
do.
I'm
Chris, you do
terrible.
better than I
Hey,
could
in
do.
fairness, people mispronounce mine. I've been called Chris Belez many times. So,
Yeah, well, we
Okay.
just let you drown. That's the funny part.
okay, so we're just gonna move on to talk some Prime One. They've come up throughout the show here a couple times already. So let's just hang on one second here. Our chat just disappeared, so hang on. You guys fill some space here.
Oh, there you go.
Um,
You
I gotta
know,
get
Cecilia was asking that, every so often, maybe she'll just hang around on the side and keep an eye on the questions that are being asked, because it seems like we miss them sometimes because we're all talking to each other. And, she could see the questions on the side. She's here anyway, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we could take
Well-
advantage of it every so often.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult for us to always catch all the comments.
Well, especially if they're not in English.
One
That's
last thing.
the thing, because Cecilia can speak Spanish,
Oh, awesome.
So
Well, this is Portuguese, though. I don't know. It's not the same. I don't think.
It's
Yeah,
terrible.
it's a little different.
Oh, whoops. Okay. Sorry, bear with me here, guys. I don't know what happened to the.
That's okay. One last thing about the XM Lobo. I know you were mentioning how the bike was one of the most challenging parts of that sculpt to put together and design. And, I find that interesting because a lot of the accolades that came towards that statue, a lot of the praise that came with that statue is the bike. People seem to really like the bike. And especially with the very decisive or divisive collecting community where everyone has their own, different opinions, varying opinions. The bike really impressed everyone with that Lobo. So you should be proud. It's
Oh, thank you.
it's a really good
And
stat.
it's important to say that's
Yeah.
always teamwork. So Martin helping a lot with this bike. Um, all statues that I did, it was a teamwork, and I was really happy to work with uh, Martin and Eng in this Lobo project.
Well, it's
All
turning
right.
out that Martin and Sang are among the easiest people in the industry to work with. It's we hear it regularly.
Yeah,
You
they're
know,
really nice guys. Yeah,
yeah, it's wonderful, and they will always give credit. There are some companies that don't even put the name of the sculptor on the box,
yeah,
which is, ugh, that that we still see this in this day and age, where you have other companies that will go out of their way to say who did it. And I remember one time, just as a quick aside, one time I was writing a review, and someone asked me, you should put the name of the engineer who worked on this piece because he worked so crazy on it. I said, hey, no problem, I'll do it. And you don't see a lot of other companies doing that, so it's great to see
yeah.
it.
This is something great about XM for sure, but Sideshow in the site we have the name of the painter.
Yeah, they've got the people who
Yeah,
did the molds there.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I
Yeah.
think it's
And that's
really
great to
nice.
see.
Yeah,
Okay, so Prime One. We're gonna start off. I want to show this guts from Berserk. Um, this piece, I mean, heavily detailed, but it is an anime piece. So, do
yeah.
you find that's a challenge switching from genre to genre? I mean, we've looked at a lot of comic book pieces so far.
Yeah. So this piece, like all others, was teamwork, right? At first, it was sculpted by a really big artist called Alessandro Baldasseroni. He did a lot of statues for Primon, but the statue that he did wasn't really fitting the Primon vision. So my job was to take his model, his sculpt, and change a lot of things. Like I sculpted the head, the arm, the base. So yes, it was a big challenge. It has a lot of elements, really complex statue. The sculpting the cape was really hard, and yeah, it's a different style, more anime statue,
Mm-hmm.
but yet it's very realistic, right? Very detailed. So I was like my comfort zone there.
Yeah, this one, I mean, Berserk is kind of that maybe blurs the line a little bit more than another anime statue we'll get to a bit
Yeah,
later. Yeah, you mentioned the base. I mean, look at this thing. I mean, all all kinds of stuff happening there.
yeah.
So how much? I guess how does that happen often, where you'll get someone else's work and have to um rearrange it, change it some way?
Well, when I was at Primon, yes, sometimes we had to change some things. Like I was saying, sometimes like in this case, Alessandro didn't sculpt Guts' hair, um, thinking about the 3D printing process. So it was really thin, and it wasn't going to work well for production. So for Prime One, it's very common to have an artist to fix other artists' work, and I did it a lot. But
What you're talking about, it almost sounds like inexperience. They didn't take 3D printing into account.
yeah,
Because it seems like when you're working, you're thinking of the engineering, you're thinking of the
yeah,
3D printing later, and some artists just do the design and they don't necessarily take everything into consideration. And
yeah,
it makes sense because if you're a writer, for example, or if you're a screenwriter, or anything that's in the entertainment field, an artist has a point, a threshold, a ceiling, that's as far as they can go, and then it goes into somebody else's hands to, to take it to the last mile,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Prime One and other studios too. A lot of times they take very famous artists, but artists who worked for cinematics or movies or games. So they are really amazing doing art, but not great doing statues. So they do this really cool statue, but um, the engineering part is missing. So we
Yeah.
have like this flash when I sculpted it. It was the first statue that I fully sculpted for Primon from scratch, and
Oh,
it has a really dynamic pose, right? And
yeah.
Yeah.
all the time we were thinking about making a iron rod on his leg, iron peg, like
Hmm.
to carry his weight, and we designed those lightnings going from his leg to the base. Um, this this effect, of course, is for the design as well, but it's also carrying the flash weight. So
Oh,
uh,
really? The
it's
Oh,
lightning
so
helps
it's
hold them up.
yeah, yeah,
oh, so it's part of the engineering. Ah,
yeah.
gotcha.
It's mixing design and engineering, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Well,
Functional design, it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so let's. So we've looked at a few comic book pieces, some anime. How about some gaming? You mentioned you're a big gamer
yeah,
growing up. Here we
yeah,
got Geralt from The Witcher.
yeah. So
Uh, yeah, talk
uh,
about this one.
about statues like The Witcher, the Batman, the whole Batman line, it's important to say because some people think that fully sculpted Geralt, but it's not true. I mean, I don't want the credit for the whole statue. What happens in this case? Uh, Usually, the companies send us files like the Batman, Geralt, and many other games. We get the 3D files used in the game, so we start with this base. We don't have to start from scratch, right? But
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that it's easy because like I said, it's really different to make a 3D model for a game and for a statue. So for Garrett, for example, I had to sculpt his hair. A lot of details you see in the statue on his clothes, I had to sculpt it. I had to think about the base design. um, so it's a lot of work, but it's important to say that because different from XM, for example, for XM, I sculpted the characters from scratch. It's really, I say it's sculpted by me. For some statues like Garrett, I say that I worked on it because the Garrett itself isn't my creation. So
Mm,
it's
Right.
important to understand that.
So
sure.
this might be a silly question, but is there a reason why you rendered this one in this orange color versus the
I had
white?
no idea what. uh, this actually was a 3D scene that Victor Hugo sent me. It's like a setup on 3ds Max 3D software,
Okay.
and
Okay.
he had this cool scene, and I thought it was going to be fun to make it yellow or orange. No
Okay.
reason.
So you just run it through like a render, and it pops that out. Sort of takes your model and creates that little scene behind it.
Yeah, it's a scene with this fabric on the background, all the lighting, all the setup, and you
Hmm.
just load your 3D file there and press enter, wait for a few hours, and it's done.
A few hours. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
um,
so
Alvaro, I have a quick question. Sorry, go ahead, Julian.
no, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
When you're putting together a piece and it's got so many pieces to it, do the companies ever say to you, can you go from 40 pieces to 20 pieces? It's going to be more expensive if we, have so much extra to it. Like, do you ever feel any kind of pressure to tone it down for financial reasons?
yeah, for sure. Prime One, I learned a lot about it with Prime One. They always saying, the more pieces we have, the more expensive is the statue. Also, the base size. I always have this in mind because if the base is really big, the statue will take a huge space. The box will be big. It will be heavy. It will be expensive. So when I'm
Mhm.
designing a statue, I always trying to mix all these things to make them
Issues
more.
together, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you sort of learn that lesson or sort of get experience with that when you did the turtles? Because that those bases were huge on the
Yeah.
turtles. Yeah.
Today I see the turtles and think, oh my god,
No,
what I was
but they're
had in mind. Yeah.
amazingly sculpted. Like they're really well done. And I remember watching quite a few reviews on those turtles and seeing the detail sculpted on those bases, which is it was amazing. It was, and I think those statues as well. It kind of began to put Prime One into the
Yeah.
mindset of a lot of collectors because before they were just known for the Transformers and those turtles,
Yes.
and they were so well done. And speaking from a non-turtles fan. And I was just extremely impressed. I wanted to, since we're on the topic of The Witcher, I wanted to sort of ask a non-statue question. Are you a fan of the game? I know you game, or do you play the game? And
I played for a few hours only.
only
I'm
okay.
in the same boat. I couldn't decide
I'm a
what
poser.
kind of character I wanted to be. Like, there's so much options in that game. It's hard to
Yeah,
get started because I didn't know
the
where to
game is
go with it.
amazing.
What about the Netflix series? Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, at first this teaser of Henry Cavill, I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know. He was
They upgraded
very, very
his look for
clean,
sure.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And those images that they released recently, I was like, whoa, he looks badass.
Yeah.
So
Uh, Sorry, quickly, a question here from Adam who's watching. He's asking about paint. Like, do you have any input on the coloring? I know, like, do you color your renders to try and give some direction to the painter, or do you have any input in that?
yes, for XM Studios, yes, I'm while I'm sculpting, always trying to put some color on the statue because it's really good for Sang to have this reference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the end, he's the boss. Like Lobo, at first I imagined the base with lava, so it was more uh, red and yellow. And at the end, he decided to put like poison, so the base is green. But
Right.
yes, I always trying
And
to
that was
help
the
him.
end of that.
Well, we all have bosses. I think
Yeah,
that change stuff. So here's another piece that you worked on with Prime One. We got this is Batman Beyond.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
So
it's
this is
interesting. This one was, I'm sure you guys will probably remember, this was one of the most popular ones of the line.
yep.
It
You know,
Yeah.
the
was. It
Batman
was.
Beyond.
It was. Yeah.
At
I
first, I was thinking, oh, why is Prime One doing like a skin from the game? But at the end, people love it.
Exactly. And someone hit the nail on the head on this one because
Yeah,
people just went wow, and some people even like that one more than the Arkham Knight, right?
yeah.
yeah. Also, I the original statue, the original model, he has like this dark glass on his mouth, covering his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And Prime One asked me to create a second head without the glass, and it turned out that this new head is much more popular than the
Than the
original
class.
one.
Ah.
Okay, so we got another Batman that you worked on. This is the
Oh yeah,
Batfleck.
big
So
challenge
talk a little
also.
bit about the process for this one. Do you also get a file to work with from the movie
Yes,
studio?
yeah, but different from the Witcher file. Like the Witcher file was really detailed, so I had all the skin powers from Gerald, but for this Batman, the files were really low resolution files used in the movie. So I had to work a lot more on Ben Affleck's likeness, on details. I got really big images from the movie, like all angles from the costume, and I was trying to copy all the scratches from from the costume. It was a really big challenge and big statues too, right? Half scale was really crazy for me.
Oh yeah,
Can
I
you
forgot. Yeah, it is a big one.
can you explain, just for us sort of non-artist folks, what kind of file do you get from the studio when you said you get a file? Because obviously from the games, I think most of us can understand that these digital games will have digital 3D files of how they, and
Yeah.
that's how they sort of use to make the game and what they're using the artist file when they're in the game. But for the studios and for these Hollywood films, what kind of files are you getting? Are these just like still images from the movie? Are these
Yeah, no, for this Batman
yeah.
versus Superman, it was like the digital double. Is it correct?
Okay.
Like and
Okay.
when Batman is jumping or Superman's flying in the movie, most times it's a 3D model, right?
Right.
So I got those files from the
Uh,
movie.
okay.
It's like a Batman in a really awkward pose,
Okay.
like a facing forward.
Okay.
And my job was to take it, work on it, work on the anatomy, work on the details, likeness, and everything.
So did
And
they
also,
scan the actor's body? Like, do they do a scan of
uh,
Ben Affleck or?
I I don't think so because the body was really bad.
Okay.
It was really
Well,
weird.
all right. A quick question here from Adam again, who's watching. He says, you mentioned that once in a while you had to take a piece and change it, fix it. Have you ever had one of your pieces changed or fixed? And
Oh,
does it bother you?
Uh,
yes. How dare
uh,
they?
Yeah. Well, you might not.
uh,
I mean, you have no say in it, and you might not say. You might think, "Oh, well, that wasn't how I wanted it to be," right?
just a second. Just let me read it again.
Okay.
Oh, so it happens to me too because it's important to know as an artist that the sculpture is not yours. It's not your son. It's a product, right? And the company is paying you for it. So, for example, the Sabertooth for XM Studios, they just released some image, right?
Yep.
At first, in the base, there was going to be some claws like robot. I don't know how to say. It's like some claws,
Okay.
and in the end, they decided to change it and do some saws. It's correct,
Okay.
correct? Those round saws,
Okay.
and it was I think Martin sculpted them. So they changed the my sculpture, and I'm totally okay with it. Like I said, every project is a teamwork, and we
Right.
have to be okay with changes. During
Okay.
all the statues, Sang and Martin asked me to change some things. Sometimes I don't agree a lot with them, but most times they are correct. The statues is always better with other people helping you. So
You,
Okay. So
you know,
Sabretooth, I didn't
if
know
you're on a
you were doing that.
creative team where you get most often you agree, then that is a dream relationship.
yeah,
You know.
some artists are not okay with that. Some artists like, oh, they changed my statue. I don't like it, and they get angry. So um,
Yeah. Well, some people also don't like it when, they worked on 95% of the piece and someone came in and just like changed the mannerisms of the hand. And then all of
yeah,
a sudden there are two names on the project.
yeah,
And, it drives artists absolutely insane
yeah,
because it doesn't say, wait, can you say 95% next to my name and 5% next to his
Yeah.
name, or
yeah.
make it a smaller name, you know?
And this
Yeah.
is
You
why
you at least
I
use bigger font, right? Yeah.
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 This is why most projects that I did for Primon, I don't have my portfolio because I was like this 5% of the project. So
Mm.
I don't think it's fair for the artist to say that I worked on it. Like
Yeah.
Guts, I
Yeah.
did a lot of things on the model, so I feel it's fair. And
Justifiable.
Yeah, and before I posted on my portfolio, I contacted the original artist, Alessandro Baldasseroni, and asked him if he was okay with that, and he said no problem. So I always trying to be fair. I
Yeah.
always putting all everyone's name on the credits.
So here's another one that you did. It's on your
Oh,
Ah,
ArtStation page. These are photos from this morning, actually, at
beautiful
Montreal Comic Con.
pictures.
Yeah. So
Do you have all of them?
you sent three. Yeah, I got.
I sent four.
You sent four. Okay, hang on.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay,
It's okay. You don't
okay,
have to.
there
Oh,
we
there
go.
you go. This is the first time I'm seeing this piece in person. I've seen pictures of it. I never saw it in person. And wow, the likeness is fabulous. And the eyes looked real,
oh, nice.
you know?
Thank.
I'm taking pictures, and there wasn't a lot of a crowd because Prime One, they were nice. They invited me to come earlier before the people came so I can get some shots done. And I found myself just staring at this one, thinking, "Oh my, am I going to end up buying this one?" Because it looked great. It's one of those flawless pieces.
It looks really good. Can you tell us about the imaging or reference imaging that you got to work on that statue? Is it the same? Like, did you basically work from movie stills or?
This
This one
the
had
models
four
from,
portraits, right?
yeah, all the models from Suicide Squad and Batman versus Superman was the same. We got the digital files, really bad files,
Okay.
but we got also really good reference images, so we could like do a super zoom on Margot Robbie face,
Right.
and this
So
helps a lot
they
to
don't fly
make the
Margot
live.
Robbie over to stand in front of you guys, and you
No,
can
no.
mono. No, that's too bad.
But again,
So,
it was uh,
so as a when you're working on movie or statues that are based on actresses or actors or movies, um, getting the portrait right is almost is essential. That's the make or
yeah,
break, right? So I guess um, with that statue there, um, you know where do you know how do you are you in terms of your process, are you sort of looking from left, center, then right? Are you is that your process to go from all around 360 to make sure that you're getting uh, that accuracy?
yeah, sure. Sculpting people is really hard. The faces we had the most reference we have, the better, right? So for movies like Suicide Squad, I had great reference, so it helps a lot to sculpt the heads. And yeah, we have to make to fit all the angles. You don't, if it looks like the actress only in the front view, it isn't good because as a statue, you'll be looking all the angles. So you have to make every angle look like the actress. But luckily, I had photos from all the angles, so it's easier.
Cool. So one
Sometimes
thing.
we don't have this reference.
So on that subject of the portraits, we're gonna move on. Just talk about a piece that you did for Sume. Um, because I know that that's something that they really work hard on with these anime portraits. They really want them to look
Wow.
good
Yeah,
from all angles. Um,
yeah.
is it a big challenge going to a piece like this that that might look more simple to someone like us who don't realize what's going on?
Yeah, because when you're sculpting a real person, the person is 3D, right? So you have all the shapes, the volumes.
Hmm.
Uh, it's easier, uh, not easier, right? It's
Different, yeah,
yeah, it's different
yeah.
because for this Bleach character, for example, when you are sculpting a character from an anime, you have like this 2D image and you have to translate it to the 3D. So it's really hard. It looks simple, but it isn't. Like in the show, sometimes the character is like facing from the side, and you can see its mouth on the side of his cheek.
Yeah.
So if you do this in the statue, it will be really weird, right? So the challenge to make statues like this is to translate well the drawing for the sculpture.
Mm.
Yeah, because they don't necessarily have the human anatomy, right?
Yeah,
Like if you're doing a Batman, you know what a male body should
yeah.
look like, right?
Also,
Whereas,
there's a fun fact about this prototype for the Hitsugaya.
okay,
You can see his left arm is facing up, but it isn't supposed to be like this. And when they were taking the pictures, they placed the arm
oh
in the
really?
wrong direction. So
Oh
when I
no.
saw this, I was like, "Oh my God, what have you done?"
I would
It
never have
was
noticed. So
supposed to
it's
be.
actually okay.
You know, one of the things I've noticed with Sumi, I don't know why they're doing this. Maybe it's just part of their style. You were always seeing like splashing water or splashing fire or jackets flowing everywhere.
It's just the
um
style. Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it seems like a challenge. You know, it's a greater challenge artistically to get that flow. Usually, you know, you have a jacket, it's easy, relatively easy to do. But with them, they don't want you just to do a jacket. The jacket is just as
yeah.
alive as the person.
It has to be the most dynamic jacket ever, right?
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
So
and the same with the water, the same with the lava. And
yeah,
it's really what gets people to notice them.
yeah,
You know, it's very eye candy-ish, you know?
yes.
so with their statues, a lot of them have that clear resin. Um, does it make any difference to you what the final material is going to be? Like, if you know it's going to be clear, does it change your process at all?
Sometimes I like this the ice wings. I have to do the details a little stronger because when you do it with transparent material, it loses a lot of detail. So this is the only difference. It doesn't change a lot the way I sculpt.
Oh, okay, so you just sharpen it a little bit
Yeah,
almost.
I make
Yeah.
a little sharper. Yeah,
Okay.
Uh,
Cool.
so far we've seen comic book inspired statues and movie character inspired statues, and now anime. Does it when you sort of move from one genre to the next, do you have to sort of take a breath before you start that other genre or move to the other genre? I mean, it's such different styles.
yeah,
Do you sort of like, okay, I mean, you just can't jump into it. So if you have, for example, if you've got one file open of Lobo, and then oh, now you have to make adjustments to that anime that we just saw there, that and you have to open up that file. Do you have to sort of take some time to sort of like get into that new style or that new genre?
uh, uh, when I was working on White Magneto, I was always also working on this Hitsugaya model and the Wonder Woman on horse for Prime One. So
Oh,
three
wow.
different
I've seen
styles.
that one. That one's really good.
It's huge, right?
Yeah.
So three different styles, and uh, it's not that hard. When I
So
open a second file, I forget the other
That's
jobs and focus
that's a
only
true
on this
pro
one.
right there.
okay, so that's sort of what Chris is just saying there. That's one of your professional
Yeah,
talent, is that you're able to to move bam 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 from genre to genre on the same night of working bam bam bam.
yeah,
And that's just
yeah.
pretty impressive.
Oh,
All right, so I think we're gonna move on here. Alvaro is gonna share his screen with us and open up some 3D models.
sure.
One that you're working on. Well, first I'll show a couple photos of it, I guess. Um, this is a Grim Reaper. You said you gave him a name. I can't recall what
Yeah,
it
I
was. Do you
called
want
it Lutumus. I created this name.
Lutimus?
I don't know where from.
Cool.
Lutumus.
Yeah.
I would have used that name.
Yeah, it's like a Court of the Dead name.
Sure
They
you
use
would.
really.
Okay, so
So
We'll give you a minute to open up your screen here, and
Oh, sure.
I'll just keep
Just a
showing
second.
photos till you're ready. So these images that I'm showing, these are renders.
Yeah. No. These were pictures that I took
Oh, you
because,
printed it.
yeah,
Oh,
recently
wow.
I got a 3D printer, so I'm doing I'm having some fun with it.
So that's the actual printed.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because so far I have been working for companies for
Yeah.
like 4 years, I guess,
Yeah.
and I want to start doing my own personal projects.
So
So
this is the
I
first time you got a printer? All this time you've never had a printer, only now you recently
no,
got
like I said, most statues that I did for Primal, I never saw them in person.
one. Okay.
And Brazil is like the forest place on earth compared to Japan,
Oh,
and so I never went to Japan. I never
You should.
saw. Yeah, yeah, it would be great.
Well,
So I
ask
just
ask
3D
the guys from
sculpted and sent
Singapore
them.
to send you there. You know?
Yeah, I want to visit Singapore. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, great.
Yeah,
So
so let's walk us through a little bit of ZBrush here.
yeah, so this is ZBrush, this crazy interface with a lot of buttons. This is where we create the statues. And here I have an earlier stage from this character, and here is the final one. Let me show you. So let me get a pen here. Just a second. Oh, I lost it. So okay, this is the final sculpture, and the brush works a lot like a real clay. Usually we start with a simple shape like a sphere, like this, and you can imagine this sphere in your hand, and you just start uh, adding volume to it. It's like really fun at the beginning. Like uh, you can use symmetry too. So this is something that 3D changed a lot compared to traditional sculpting, because when you do traditional sculpting, you don't have symmetry. You have to sculpt both sides of the character. But here I can, for example, sculpt both eyes at the same time.
ah,
And so it's like this. I usually use a tablet, like a pen and a tablet,
okay.
uh, like comic artists and those guys.
Yeah.
And usually I start with a simple model like this, and after like 1 month, 2 months, I have this.
Wow.
Wow.
Uh,
Concept. You know, it's very interesting how you're working. I'll tell you why. You know, when you talk to a comic book artist, I don't know if you ever heard of a name, Bernie Wrightson. Does that say anything to you?
oh, I'm terrible with
Oh,
names.
that's okay.
Usually I know
Well,
the artist works only.
probably he did some great Frankenstein stuff, a lot of horror. The reason why I bring it up is sometimes when you ask a comic book artist, how do you come up with your stuff? And they say, you know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm cheating. I'm looking at a piece of paper and like a projector is coming out of my head, going onto the piece of paper, and I'm just tracing it. And when I'm seeing you work, that couldn't be further from what you're doing. Like you got a sphere and you just kind of let it become what it's going to become. And you don't
Yeah,
always know in advance where you're going to go with it. Whereas a comic book artist, they look at the piece of paper and they've already decided. So it's a
yeah,
very different way of working.
yeah, yeah. Usually I have this first idea, like I want to sculpt some. In this case, I wanted to sculpt something similar to Court of the Dead from Sideshow.
Yeah.
So I looked for a lot of reference, and with time I got this.
Well, that would fit
Wow.
right into their line for sure.
That's
Yeah.
right. So this is the second time you've mentioned Court of the Dead. Are you? I guess you
Yep.
must be a big fan of that
Yeah.
line.
I
Yeah.
love this style, this
Is
dark
is this
fantasy
then?
style.
Is this your favorite genre then? Like this darker
Yeah.
gothic? Okay.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
love to sculpt superheroes, of course, but
uh-huh.
this more
this is this
fantasy.
is this is your style.
Yeah.
Wow.
How is the book held up in the air? Oh, he's always got another hand. Okay, I did see that.
Yeah. He has 3 arms.
He's got three, right?
He has like do you remember this small goblin from the Hobbit movie that
Yeah.
writes with
Call.
his nail? So I copied it from the movie too. He has this nail and a ink
Is
uh,
it this? Is that the
glass.
arm from the little guy on his chest there?
Yeah, he has
Yep.
like a second head here. A lot of crazy stuff, right? But yeah, this is how he holds the book.
So how long would you say it took you to master ZBrush, this software, this program?
Uh, I still learning a lot.
Uh-huh.
We are always learning, right? But I guess in 1 year maybe I was doing some nice works,
Yeah.
but it can take many years to really become a master. I'm not there yet.
But you still have to have the creativeness in you, the creativity in you. It's not just work at it for a year like playing guitar.
Yeah, yeah,
Not everybody after playing a year of guitar are going to come out the same.
yeah. There are two different things. One is to learn ZBrush to learn how to use the software, but in the end, the software is just a tool, right? You
Right.
have
Yeah.
to learn anatomy, sculpture, design, all these things to make a cool statue. Only knowing the software isn't going to make you a great sculptor.
I have a question about ZBrush, and it's very interesting because this seems to be an industry that's constantly evolving. Do you find that the programs that you're using have limitations that you find have room for improvement?
Um, Maybe let me see. The program when I started ZBrush, it was like 10 years ago, maybe. It was already really good, but with time they came with really great improvements. It's like you don't know what you need until they show you. So they came with new tools that helped us a lot. But today, I think the softwares are so great that it doesn't limit your creativity. As a sculptor, I don't feel ZBrush is holding me. I feel I have a lot of freedom here. So I don't know the future of the 3D sculpture.
Because, like, I'll give you an example. You have this figure right in front of you right now. What if, and I'm probably very naive in what I'm about to say. So you're looking at this figure right now, this bust of Arya, and what if there would be like a function that say, okay, let's make her crying, let's make her happy, let's make her, angry, and it would just be like a button, as opposed to you doing what you're doing. You see what you're doing right now? You're kind of like
Yeah,
doing that work. What if it was just a button that would do that, right?
yeah.
Or a function that would do that, and then
I,
work from there, as opposed to, you know what I mean? Like a function for emotion
A
could have
preset.
yeah, like a preset. It's a consistent thing: anger, sadness, happiness. And I wonder if
yeah.
that's like a thing that could evolve in the program.
But they have
I,
like presets for like textures, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some things like textures or unlike this those stitches on his clothes, I didn't had to create each of them.
Right.
We can create a tool that will make it most automatically. But
Right.
I think with time, of course, the technology will evolve a lot. Maybe in future, with a couple pictures from someone, a software will be able to create a 3D model. Like it already
The,
exists, I think.
the
But
reason why I'm saying that is, once you get the facial bone structure of a character and it looks like you have it, once you have the facial bone structure, the computer should be able to predict what a smile is going to look like. I don't
yeah,
know.
I think it's
Yes.
really complex to understand the face, the human face. It changes a lot. Some people, when they smile, it produces a different wrinkle.
Hmm.
So I think it's so complex that we are really far from it. But I
Okay.
understand what you are saying. I think like 3D scan is changing a lot. because today you have really high resolution scan. So probably in future we won't have to sculpt a lot of faces like this area. We could just use the actress itself. But I think the technology stops. The limit of the technology is the creation itself. Like you never have a dragon to do a 3D scan, right?
Hmm.
An orc. So I think with time, the artist that will be most important will be the one who can create as well. Because some artists they they are really good sculptors. If you give them a great concept art, they will be doing a great statue. But if you ask them to create something, they will
Mm.
be stuck. So I
Yeah,
think yeah,
it's
I,
hard.
I
It's like getting a singer who can write music or an actor who can write screenplays. Can't always find the Woody Allens of the world.
Yeah. But I
yeah,
think just to sort of touch on that sort of preset question, I think one thing I've sort of learned over several years of just getting new cameras and getting new software for graphics, things like that. Um, you know, can technology can give you the opportunity um, to produce something, but it doesn't give you the one single button. So,
yeah,
for example, if you want to add a blue tint to something, you can add the blue tint, but then it offsets and then it screws something else up. So you have to be able to balance and you have to be able to spend the time. So technology gives you the opportunity to be more creative or to add or different styles, do this. You can get a brand new camera lens and you say, wow, now I'm going to be able to be able to take this photo now. I'm able to do this. Yeah, you have the new camera lens. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't give you that image instantly. You have to be able to
yeah,
sort of balance and be able to use the camera lens and use all the settings properly and learn how to use it. So technology can give you the opportunity. It doesn't give you very few things in technology gives you the preset
yeah.
button. You know, but you were showing Arya there. Is she your? This is sort of a non-ZBrush question. Is she your favorite from Game of Thrones?
Uh, yeah, I like her.
Yeah.
At the end, I think I changed a lot of opinion, but I like the character. And also I did a 3D printing of her. You can see
Oh,
there.
cool. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
oh, that's cool.
absolutely.
Yeah. Also, this Batman that I showed, I had this printed too. My wife painted it,
Oh, very
so
nice.
Oh,
it's
that's awesome.
So you have this. Where is this printer?
oh, it's in a room
And
in
how long
here.
would it take to print something like that?
Like Aria took about 12 hours, I guess.
Wow.
And the Reaper, the Lutimus,
The
probably take
Lutimus.
like 2 weeks, I guess, because he
Two
has
weeks.
40 parts. So I had to print each part and then put all together.
So how do you come
Wow.
up? How do you come up with the parts? Like, so you're in your program, you do your full model, and then do you cut it up then, or do you cut it up as you go, or how do you?
Yeah, usually I scoop the whole statue. Then at the end, I think about the engineering. So I start cutting and making those plugs to make the
Connector, yeah.
pieces. Yeah, yeah.
The
Usually
keys?
in the end. But as I mentioned, I have this in mind during the whole process. So in the middle of the sculpting I do something that I think won't work during production, I try to change it. So when I do a statue, I always thinking, oh, I will cut here, I will cut there.
And
It
when
helps.
when when the piece comes out of the printer, it doesn't come out all nice like that, right? You got to do a lot
Yeah,
of shaving, and
yeah,
so is that something you could see improving with time, or do you think it'll
yeah,
always? Yeah, okay.
for sure.
So do
I
you
think
think
3D.
someday we're gonna look back on these printers and think of how,
Yeah,
like,
no, I'm sure.
barbaric it was?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really
Yeah,
messy
we had to
process.
shave it. It was prehistoric.
Yeah.
Mine,
Speaking of,
it's
sorry, go on.
uh, there's a lot of 3D printing technologies. The most common is that FDM. It's like a melted plastic. It's a cleaner process, but you have in the end you have a lot of lines in the model. It's the resolution isn't great. So my printer uses a different technology. It's a resin, liquid resin, and use UV light to cure the resin, and it's really messy and smelly. So it's really toxic. When
Oh.
this area came out of the printer, it was all uh,
Yeah.
all dirt.
Marco
It's a
showed
long
me.
process. Yeah.
Marco showed me what it looks like coming out of the machine.
Yeah. Oh, I
How
have
much work
some
he has to
Marco
do.
models here. It's
There
from
you go.
yeah.
That's a
This
pen
model.
holder. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
So speaking, if you want to make changes to your ZBrush as you're working on it, just for us layman folks, does ZBrush work in a layer base? Like, do you have different layers? Where
Yeah.
and then you can use does it work that way? So one layer might be the texture, one layer might be the arm that you're working on. It works in like a layer base.
Yes, you can use layer. The layer system in ZBrush isn't very good, but you have this option. But
Okay.
usually, what I do, I save a lot of different files during the process. So um, before I make the pose for the character, for example, I save a file, and I make the pose, I save again. So if Sang asks me to change something, uh, like before the pose, I have the file. So
Okay.
usually in the end, I have like 100 files for each statue.
Okay, cool. So for
Wow.
example, if you have Lobo and you're just working on the body, or sorry, let's say you're working just on the head, and that might be one file. Then the second file might be Lobo and his body, and
Yeah,
then that way, if for example, if you have to fix the body or change the body, then you just go with the first file that has the head and then start over like that.
yeah.
That's how you work. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Also, I try to separate things. Like when I'm detailing the Lobo bike, I don't need the body. So I usually will have a file for the bike only
Yep,
and
yep.
a lower resolution version of Lobo, because when you have all the files, it's really heavy for the computer.
For the computer.
It
Yep.
has like a 200 million polygons, the sculptures. So it became it became really slow. So I try to manage these things. I try to separate many files.
That's awesome.
Great.
Okay, any last questions here for Alvaro?
I
Had a
have
great time here.
just one that we kind of glossed over. You know, a lot of times we notice that artists come from gaming backgrounds, but did you also read comic books? Like, did you collect at one time, or were you more a fan of the movies and the cartoons? And
Yeah, I never read some any comic books. I think maybe when I like started doing Magneto, I got a lot of comics to use as reference.
reference, right?
But I'm not into reading comic books. I'm more into movies and games.
You know, it's very interesting that you say that because you're not alone. What you're saying, don't feel like, oh my God, the secret is out. You know, there are a lot of other artists who seem to present your
Yeah.
profile.
People
Um,
think the sculptors are like really into comics. But sometimes we are not.
well, what
So
happens is that you absorb, right? And that seems to be one of your skills, that you could look at a comic book and absorb the essence of the character and insert it into your sculpture.
yeah,
And that way, you know, you're not fooling anybody, meaning that no one's going to be thinking, oh, this person doesn't know who Magneto is.
yeah,
You know, they're going to think like, oh, this person knows who Magneto is. Whereas there are some people, I'll give you an example. You know what cosplaying is, right?
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't work because it looks like someone wearing a Black Widow
yes,
costume.
yes,
I mean, you need to be Black Widow in the Black Widow costume in order for it to work. And
yeah,
it's the same thing with sculpting, because if someone, and you know, we're not going to bring up any examples, even though we probably all can bring up examples where you look at a statue and you're going, that is not Elektra, right?
yeah,
Or you're going, that is not, you know, the Green Goblin. That they somehow missed the essence of the character
yeah,
and it didn't work. It might look like a nice character, but it wasn't the essence of the character and it didn't work.
yeah.
You know, and
Sometimes
yeah.
sometimes Sideshow, for example, try to make a more realistic version of the characters, and a lot of times collectors don't like the result. So it's a really dangerous. It's really hard to get to a balance between realistic stuff and comics. So when we think like Magneto or Wolverine, we we have an image in our minds, right? This ideal image of the character. So if the sculptor uh, can't do it in his work, people will see the character as a cosplayer, for example. It's important to capture the essence of the characters.
It's a must. At least I think so. You know.
Yeah.
So one quick point from a viewer here, Langston Speaks. He says, "Have we asked you about sculpting Star Lord yet?" And no, we haven't. I did not know that Alvaro
Oh yeah, I
did
did
that piece.
Star Wars. It isn't my portfolio yet, but I did the Star Wars, the blue one for the XM.
For XM.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Sabretooth was mentioned. I didn't realize you did that one either. And
Yeah.
I'm also getting those two. So I'll have 3 of your pieces here.
The Star Lord went through a big change, though, right? You know, they got rid of
I think
a big piece of
the
it.
original concept was more like the movie, right? With the clothes and
with the
everything.
jacket. Yeah.
Yeah, and they went with this more classic. I didn't know this costume, so I went to a lot of comics to learn how this Star
Well,
Wars.
I think a lot of people don't know the costume of Star Lord.
Yeah.
The movies introduced so many people, including myself, to the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
So yeah, Gina, any last questions for Alvaro?
Well, I want to thank you once again for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely.
It's been an absolute pleasure. One last question. We've seen your your work through many genres, gaming and comics and film. Is there one genre that you kind of want an opportunity to sort of work in that you haven't got that opportunity yet? I think maybe like Gothic that you were talking about, maybe, or
Yeah, I think I did a lot of different styles already, but one that I didn't do professionally, at least, it's like this Curse of the Dead theme, like creatures, darker fantasy stuff. I love this kind of thing. But a good thing about being an artist and having a 3D printer is that I can do whatever I want. So
Right.
if I'm not get a chance to work on a Wolverine for XM, for example, I can just sculpt my Wolverine and have my own statue, right?
That's gotta be so
Are you
cool, yeah.
would you say you're at a point in your career where you could just like knock on Sideshow's door and say, "Hey, you know, I'm interested in working on one of your Court of the Dead pieces"? I mean, like, you know, at one point, an artist should be able to do that. Like, some superhero, some actors say, "You know what? I want a superhero role," and they create one for them, right?
yeah,
So
maybe who knows?
some artists, you know, in comic books, the same thing. They start campaigning once they become famous or reliable. They start campaigning for the books that they really want to work on.
Yeah,
So I think sculptors at one point, now that they become more known, right?
yeah,
That you start wanting to see them do certain things. And you know, artists, they don't always. That's the hardest part about being an artist, is there's a lot of waiting for someone to notice you. There's a lot of
yeah.
waiting for the work to come. And I think that a lot of artists can take risks, knock on doors, and see if there's something that they can do, some kind of meeting of the minds or opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I almost worked for Sideshow, but the project got canceled. But who knows in future? But
Exactly.
I'm really happy with XM at the moment, and I'm trying to focus more on personal projects like this one. So let's see.
All
What
right.
happens.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Alvaro. I had a blast, learned a lot from you today, and
Absolutely.
hopefully all the viewers did as well.
Oh, thank you a lot.
And you come back and see us again.
Sure, we'll keep
Excellent.
in touch.
Okay, thanks
Great.
everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.